In the turbulent years following the Civil War, when Indian Territory was a crossroads of outlaws, whiskey runners, and broken treaties, one of my favorite names of the West stood for law and order: Sam Sixkiller. A full-blood Cherokee and veteran on both sides of the conflict, Sixkiller rose from humble beginnings in the Going Snake District to become one of the most feared and respected lawmen on the frontier. As High Sheriff of Tahlequah, Captain of the U.S. Indian Police, and Deputy U.S. Marshal, he walked a line few dared to cross, bringing justice to a land where justice was often settled by the gun. Well, let's get into it, shall we? My name's Steven, and welcome to Wild West Deep Dives. Sam Sixkiller was born in 1842 in the Going Snake District of the Cherokee Nation, today's Adair County, Oklahoma. His family name carried a legend that echoed through generations. As told in multiple sources, the name Sixkiller came from a Cherokee ancestor who, during a fierce conflict between the Cherokee and Creek nations, killed 6 Creeks before falling himself. From that day, he was remembered as Sixkiller, and the name descended through the family line, carried with distinction by each generation. Sam grew up amid deep Cherokee heritage and post-removal hardship. His father, Redbird Sixkiller, had been a leader during the Cherokee removal from Georgia, the Trail of Tears, and later settled 5 miles west of Cincinnati, Arkansas. Redbird built a large family and served his people in government, even being elected Special Supreme Judge in 1869-70 to settle disputed citizenship cases. It is a little unclear whether Sam Sixkiller was a full-blood or mixed-blood Cherokee. His biographers, Chris Enns and Howard Kazanjian, described him as a full-blood Cherokee, and I tend to trust their research. However, I want to share everything I found so you can form your own opinion. Sam's great-great-niece said, as you will hear later on, that his mother, Palmalia Whaley, was an English girl, and other records suggest that Sam's grandfather may have married a mixed-blood woman before having Sam's father, Redbird. So while the biographers list him as a full-blood, the truth might be a little bit more complicated. I'll leave it to you to decide. I'm just a man that loves history and has access to a microphone. As a boy, Sam attended the Old Baptist Mission School near present-day Westville, Oklahoma. The school had been established shortly after the Cherokee removal, and it became an important center of learning in the Going Snake District. When his father left to join the Union Army in 1861, 19-year-old Sam stayed behind to manage the family farm and care for his mother and his siblings. When the Civil War erupted, the Cherokee Nation was torn between Union and Confederate loyalties. At first, Sam was persuaded by friends and neighbors to fight under Stan Watie, serving briefly as a private in the Confederate 1st Cherokee Cavalry. But within a year, he defected to the Union side, joining his father's artillery unit at Fort Gibson, where Redbird had attained the rank of 1st lieutenant. Sam's decision to fight for the Union would come at a devastating cost. While he and his father were away at war, guerrilla bands, known as bushwhackers, terrorized Cherokee settlements. The Sixkiller family home became one of their targets. On the night of the 30th of July, 1863, bushwhackers set fire to the family stable and barn. As they looted and destroyed, Sam's mother, Palmalia, was shot and killed while shielding her youngest son in her arms, William. Both were later buried in the Baptist Mission Cemetery. Years later, Sam's great-great-niece, Gail Campbell, reflected on that tragedy in an interview. Sam's parents, Redbird and Palmalia Whaley, an English girl, married in Georgia before coming on the Trail of Tears. Palmalia and their youngest son were killed by bushwhackers during the war. Since Sam was fighting, along with his father, my great-grandmother, Mary, was the oldest child at home, and I've often thought of how tragic it would be to have your father and older brother off at war, most everything of value confiscated or stolen, and to have your mother and baby brother lying dead at the door of your cabin. When Sam and Redbird returned home in May of 1865, they found their land devastated and lawless. Survivors were scattered and living in fear of deserters, thieves, and bootleggers who roamed freely in the aftermath of the war. In the post-war chaos, Cherokee leaders were encouraged to re-establish order. Redbird Sixkiller helped organize the Citizens Court and Executive Council of the Going Snake District to resolve local disputes, and he was soon elected district judge. He also helped reorganize the Cherokee Light Horse Company, a police force that would later shape his son's own path in law enforcement. Sam, though, was ready to start a quieter life. He focused on rebuilding the family farm and soon fell in love with Frances Fanny Foreman, the daughter of a neighboring family. The two were married in September of 1865, just months after the war's end, and they moved to Tahlequah, the Cherokee capital, where Sam began establishing his own homestead. In 1874, at the urging of his father Redbird, Sam Sixkiller stepped into the world of law enforcement. He was appointed High Sheriff of Tahlequah, making him the chief lawman over the 9 Cherokee districts, and also became the first warden of the Cherokee National Prison. The new 3-story prison had just been completed in 1875, and Sixkiller quickly went to work shaping it into more than just a place of punishment. He oversaw the building of a 10-foot fence, a garden, and several mechanical shops. Prisoners worked the land, tended the gardens, and learned trades in an effort to reform rather than simply confine them. A minister held regular religious services, and those released were given a clean set of clothes to start over. Despite his efforts, whiskey smuggling continued to plague the Cherokee Nation. Bootleggers crossed into Indian territory in defiance of the law, and it was often whiskey that lay at the root of many of the crimes Sixkiller dealt with: murders, assaults, thefts, and domestic violence. In 1879, the Indian Journal reported on one of his arrests. John Coates, a white man from Maysville, Arkansas, was arrested by Deputy Marshal Sixkiller for introducing whiskey. He brought in 8 dozen bottles and had distributed most of them when captured. His horses, wagon, and contents will be confiscated, and we hope he will do the state some service in the pen. For his service as sheriff and warden, Sixkiller earned $500 a year, just under $15,000 today. Modest pay for a man who would become one of the most respected figures in the Cherokee Nation. But Sixkiller's rising career took a dark turn in 1879, when an incident outside Tahlequah nearly ended it all. One November night, a group of young Cherokee men rode into town, firing their guns in celebration and causing a ruckus. Sixkiller, hearing the commotion, rallied his deputies and pursued the riders as they fled. During the chase, one of the men, Jeter Thompson, turned in his saddle and fired at Sixkiller. The sheriff and his deputies returned fire. Thompson was hit and fell from his horse. Mortally wounded, he accused Sixkiller of shooting him out of personal spite. Thompson died soon after, not only from the wound, but from the pneumonia that followed. His wealthy family demanded justice, claiming that Sixkiller had abused his power and called for his suspension. But Sam refused to resign. He maintained that he had simply done his duty, defending Tahlequah's citizens from violence. He was arrested and tried along with 3 deputies, Cuyos Thorne, Richard Robinson, and John Boston. The Cherokee Advocate reported on the 11th of June, 1879, that their preliminary hearing would begin the next day. The trial dragged on for months, but the evidence was clear. The young men had fired first, and the sheriff's posse had returned fire only after repeated warnings. When the jury deadlocked, the case was sent to the Cherokee National Council. There, the newly appointed principal chief, Dennis Wolf Bushyhead, issued a final ruling in a letter dated the 14th of November, 1879. The council branch of the National Council failed to find any proof that would implicate Sam Sixkiller as guilty of murder and malpractice as charged. Therefore, the charges were ignored by a majority vote of the body. Though cleared, the ordeal left a bitter taste. Sixkiller requested back pay and legal expenses, totaling $1,330.50, but the council refused. They offered to reinstate him as high sheriff. Yet, he declined, and instead moved his family to Muscogee, seeking a fresh start. By 1880, Muscogee was one of the most dangerous towns in Indian Territory. More lawmen had been killed within 50 miles of the town than anywhere else west of the Mississippi. If you want to hear about the lawlessness of Indian Territory, head on over to Wild West Deep Dives on Spotify and listen to the 8-part series I did on Bass Reeves. But to quote from that series, from 1851, when the Western District Court of Arkansas was established, until 1907, when Oklahoma officially became a state, over half of all deaths of law enforcement officers that have worked for the Marshal Service since its creation in 1789 until today were from the Indian Territory. That's over 140 deaths just in the territory. Determined to change that, U.S. Indian Agent Colonel J.Q. Tufts hired Sam Sixkiller for $8 a month to bring order to the chaos. One of his first acts was raiding the notorious Hotel de Adams, a Muscogee brothel. When the women spat and scratched at him, Sixkiller jailed them and gave them a choice: serve time or leave town. They decided to leave. It was a small victory, but it sent a powerful message. Muscogee had a new lawman who meant business. That same year, Sixkiller was appointed the first captain of the United States Indian Police, headquartered at Muscogee. He also held a Deputy U.S. Marshal's commission and served as a special agent for the Missouri Pacific Railroad, which allowed him to pursue outlaws across territorial and state lines. Under his command were 100 regular officers and 300 reserves. Though not physically imposing, standing 5 foot 8 inches and weighing between 200 and 230 pounds, Sixkiller's name alone carried authority. He faced down cattle rustlers, bootleggers, train robbers, and murderers across the territory. Citizens who once feared to walk the streets began to sleep easier. Perhaps the most legendary episode of Sixkiller's career was the manhunt for Dick Glass, a Creek freedman outlaw. Glass led a gang notorious for whiskey running and horse theft, based near Muscogee. In 1880, after 2 freedmen were lynched for horse stealing, Glass retaliated by leading a raid into the Cherokee Nation, killing 1 man and igniting a diplomatic crisis between the Cherokee and Creek nations. By 1885, the Muskogee Phoenix warned that Dick Glass is getting for himself a name that soon will rival Jesse James. He had killed 2 Texas lawmen in the Chickasaw Nation, and his gang continued to terrorize the borderlands. That summer, Captain Sam Sixkiller joined forces with Captain Charles Leffler of the Choctaw Lighthorseman, Deputies Gooden and Murray, and rancher Sam McLeland. They tracked Glass and his men as they hauled a wagon load of whiskey from Denison, Texas, toward the Seminole Nation. On the 18th of June, 1885, the Burr Oak Herald of Kansas reported, "Yesterday, Captain Sam Sixkiller with policemen Leffler, Murray, and Gooding, and C.M. McLeland, a prominent stockman of the Cherokee Nation, were in pursuit of a band of blacks, headed by the notorious desperado Dick Glass, who had gone to Denison for a wagon load of whiskey and was on his way back to the Seminole Nation. When within 10 feet, Captain Sixkiller stepped into the road and commanded them to surrender. Instead of doing so, they started to run. After Glass ran a few steps, he succeeded in getting his gun out, and as he turned to fire, the party fired on them. Dick Glass and Jim Johnson were killed." According to legend, Bass Reeves himself had long wanted to capture or kill Glass, but Sixkiller beat him to it. Sixkiller continued serving as U.S. Indian Police Captain and Deputy Marshal through the 1880s. In September 1886, he and Captain Leffler clashed with 2 men in the streets of Muskogee, Black Hoyt, a mixed-blood Cherokee, and Jesse Nicholson, a white man, both drunk on moonshine. When Nicholson fired at Sixkiller, grazing his arm, Leffler shot back, wounding Nicholson, who later died of his injuries. Even after years on the frontier, Sixkiller showed no sign of slowing down. His courage and reputation as a fair but unflinching lawman made him one of the most respected figures in Indian Territory. On Christmas Eve 1886, Muscogee was packed with gamblers, cowboys, and families crowding the streets and racetrack when 2 drunk troublemakers, Alf Cunningham and his brother-in-law, Dick Vaughn, started picking fights. Cunningham first tried to murder Creek Lighthorseman Tom Kennard in front of the Commercial Hotel, jamming a pistol in his face until a passerby, Mrs. Renfro, grabbed the gun and Kennard knocked Cunningham cold with the butt of his own weapon. Humiliated and furious, Cunningham later found Vaughn at the races and the 2 men went hunting for revenge. turned away from Turner and Burns hardware store when the owner refused to sell them guns. They then jumped City Marshal Shelley Keyes, beat him, and took his shotgun and pistol. Armed and drunk, they wandered Muscogee's darkening streets looking for a lawman to kill. Around that same time, Captain Sam Sixkiller, off-duty and unarmed, stepped out of a drugstore with medicine in hand, planning to join his family for church. Van and Cunningham saw him in the streetlight and called out for him. "Sam," Vaughn sneered, "you'll never do that to me again," a reference to past run-ins with the fearless Cherokee lawman. Cunningham leveled a shotgun. Sixkiller lunged, knocked it aside, and took only a few pellets in his clothes. Before he could recover, Van drew the stolen pistol and fired 4 shots into Sixkiller's head and body, then walked closer and put a final round into him as he struggled on his hands and knees. Witnesses like rancher H.B. Spaulding and citizen Armistead Cox rushed to the scene, but there was nothing to be done. The captain lay dead in the street, his clothes soaked in blood. The killing of a man widely known as the head and heart of the Indian police stunned Indian Territory. More than 2,000 mourners attended his funeral at the Methodist Church, so many that the building could not hold them. Newspapers across the region poured out tributes, and the Muscogee Phoenix later wrote that there never was before and there never was afterwards an officer like Captain Sam Sixkiller, praising his fearlessness and saying it was worth 100 miles of travel to see Sixkiller seated in his saddle. The aftermath of his murder reshaped law and legend. Sixkiller's widow, Fanny, received heartfelt condolences from across the territory and from the Missouri Pacific Railway Secret Service, whose resolution honored him as a brave, honest, and competent officer, and a tried and true friend. His brothers Martin and Luke joined posses scouring the bottoms and river country for Van and Cunningham, while the Creek court charged the pair with murder, and a $1,500 reward was posted. Jurisdictional tangles meant that the hanging judge, Judge Isaac C. Parker from the Western District of Arkansas, could only go after Cunningham on a larceny charge for the stolen gun, while the murder case itself belonged to the Creek authorities. Cunningham eventually ended up in jail. Van stayed on the run until Deputy U.S. Marshal Jackson Ellis later shot and killed him while trying to arrest him near Fort Gibson. One lasting consequence came in 1887, when a new federal law was passed citing Sixkiller's case as an example. Any Indian who murdered or assaulted an Indian policeman or Indian U.S. Marshal would now fall under United States jurisdiction and face trial in federal court. As his great-great-niece, Gail Campbell, later summed up, at the time of his death, Sam was simultaneously captain of the Indian Police, a U.S. Deputy Marshal, and a Railroad Secret Service officer, so effective and so widely respected that his funeral procession was remembered as one of the largest that part of the country had ever seen. Sam Sixkiller's legacy endures as one of the most respected lawmen in Indian Territory history. From his early days as High Sheriff of Tahlequah to his command of the U.S. Indian Police, he brought order and integrity to a violent frontier where few others could. His murder on Christmas Eve 1886 shocked the territory. Though he will always be remembered as both fearless and fair, he became a symbol of justice in a lawless land, a Cherokee officer who gave his life defending peace on the frontier. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode on Lawman Sam Sixkiller. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and maybe subscribe. Join the membership family. For $1, you'll get access to bonus episodes like the Honeywell gunfight in Kansas. Please check out the Wild West Deep Dive Spotify. I just finished up an 8-part series on the Jolly Mountain Man, Joe Meek. Thank you all for the recent support. Y'all are amazing. We will see y'all next week, and remember, when in doubt, shoot straight, shoot fast. God bless.